in the middle of a kind of busy summer at camp, right?
I am. I work at Camp Holiday Trails, which is a camp for kids with special medical needs.
And you were a camper there as well, yes?
I was never a camper there. I
Okay.
went to a teen retreat for bleeding disorders, and then I aged out, so I kept volunteering. So I was like half camper.
And what is it about camp? So do you remember the first experience? You were there for a bleeding disorder specific weekend or event. Do you remember kind of the moments where you were like, oh, I want to keep coming back to this kind of a place?
And I just remember like sitting around a campfire and everyone was just like sharing their diagnoses. And actually that's when I found out there were different types of bleeding disorders, like different like type
Sure.
1, type 2.
Yeah.
Also figured out I did not know mine.
You can learn a lot, not even necessarily from whatever the formal educational component to something is, but just in conversation with people, you start to learn like, oh, there's different forms of this. I should learn more.
Yeah, that was definitely a big learning moment, and just like that whole weekend was so much learning. And then I went to my doctor. I was like, you did not tell me things. Just being around that community and how close-knit and how like welcoming everyone was made me be like, yeah, no, I'm coming back. You can't get rid of me.
So this was when you were 16 and you had just been diagnosed. So that's considered a late age or a late term diagnosis, being diagnosed at 16, although there are studies that say many women with bleeding disorders don't get diagnosed for upwards of 14, 15, 16 years, which is a long time to not know what's going on with your body. Do you have stories from your childhood or early teen years where you didn't know what was going on with your body?
As a child, I did a lot of sports, so I ended up getting like a lot of bleeds. I just didn't know they were bleeds. So like now I know about it, like I ruined my knees playing basketball for so long. I'm kind of like a 90-year-old woman in my knees. It's fine.
Yeah, you're in a room of people who understand that pretty well, I think. That's the good news.
No one needs knees.
What was it like, just like mentally having to grapple with this new reality?
So for the longest time, I was so stubborn. So like I hated my conditions, which kind of made me hate myself. Because I was just like, this isn't me. I've done like everything I've done my whole life. Like I love being outside. I love doing all these activities. I love just jumping from 2-story buildings.
Yeah.
That was a thing. Don't do that. It's a horrible
That's
idea.
an actual thing you
That's
did?
an actual thing.
Oh, I thought that was a joke.
It's a horrible idea. Don't
Why
do
did
it.
you jump off a 2-story building?
Because it got to the beach faster than the stairs.
Ask and you shall receive. Okay.
I had a really hard time like having to learn to re-love myself and my conditions and like deal with that.
I do think it's important that we don't present ourselves as helpless, but there's a fine line between pushing through discomfort and forcing yourself when you're in pain or having a bleed.
I finally like learned that line. I still have struggles with it when it's like I'm doing an activity and I'm like, well, I need to go sit out because my joints are really starting to hurt and I know if I keep going I'm going to get a bleed. But it's not just like I won't just sit out. I'll find a new way to participate. So like at camp, I'll use a golf cart and I will play capture the flag with a golf cart.
So what's also neat about being in a position as a counselor, when you make that choice, all right, I'm going to participate just in a different way, you're also teaching the kids with their various considerations, hey, just because you have X doesn't mean you can't participate. You just have to adapt it in a different way. You mentioned a couple times your other diagnoses. Do you mind sharing with us what those are and giving us a little insight?
I have eosinophilic gastroenteritis, which is a GI condition. So I have mast cells in my intestinal tract, and sometimes they'll just randomly flare up. Last time it acted up, I had to be in the hospital for almost 2 weeks, not eating, not drinking. I also have signs that like I'm about to have a flare, is what we call them. So like I'll stop eating, drinking slowly, and I'll be like, and I'll get more tired and like sleep 24 hours a day.
Literally?
Literally.
Wow.
Yeah.
But it's consistently that kind of pattern emerges. So when the flare is beginning, you can at least identify it and
then start treating.
Start to account for it. Yeah.
I also have mast cell disorder. So my body's allergic to vibrations.
Whoa. Oh, how are the speakers doing?
Oh no, it's good. Everything's a vibration. My body's a vibration.
Well, it sounds like you're doing a very good job of adjusting to things as they come up, and you have a number of exceptional challenges, which is not easy. Where did you find support? You mentioned your mom just now. Who else in your life has been a rock for you?
So my mom definitely has been one. The community has been a big help because like they understand it, and then my sisters have been a big part, and just like my friends. So when I first told my college roommate about my bleeding disorder, and I was like, so if this happens, could you treat me? And it's not factor. I take Stymate and Evercar, so it's real like I drink it and you put it in my nose. And my roommate actually told me she was uncomfortable.
Better for her to be honest with you than in the emergency moment. You're like, hey, and she's like, actually. My takeaway from these stories, though, is that you're not shy about making sure you get done what needs to get done. There's always going to be things. There's always going to be someone who doesn't understand, isn't willing to help, an organization that doesn't know how to deal with you. And it's the ability to navigate each of those and their own unique challenges. And it sounds as though you have those skills. You told me one story in particular about basketball.
Background, my mother made me go to like IEP meetings when I was like very young, like 4th, 3rd grade, and would always make sure like tell the teachers, oh no, you're going to talk to her. She's going to tell you what she needs. I'm not going to tell you what my child needs. Talk to her. She's a person.
Which is good on your mom.
Oh yeah. Go on her. Go Kimmy. So anyway, I was playing basketball, and it was my junior year of high school, and my coach, his name might have been Jolly, but he was not a jolly person. So I had slammed my finger into a car door, and I had a bleed. Jolly comes over and is like, hey, what's up with your finger? And I told him. And he comes over and looks at my finger and takes my finger in his hand, and I thought he was going to look at it. And he squeezes it as hard as he can. And he caused my finger that was just bleeding in the knuckle to bleed my whole hand. Wow. And I had to just tell him, like, listen, what you did was unacceptable. You made me worse. I now cannot play at all. I could have played before, but now I cannot. Like, I have to sit out. I brought in more packets. I literally sat them all down and was like, nope, we're going to have a meeting, and I'm going to tell you everything about this.
Well, and that's good for you for taking that opportunity to, because you could have handled that a lot of different ways. But that was a very mature and advocacy-friendly way to, because if it's handled a certain way, it almost makes everything worse, right? Mm. But by inviting the opportunity for them to learn more about you, you show maturity and poise, which they have to respect.
I went through all of that because I didn't want another kid to come up with a bleeding disorder and like play basketball and have to deal with that. It was not okay with the way they treated me, and I wasn't going to have them treat some other kid like that.
Well, good for you for having that awareness. That's a hard thing to have, especially at 16 and in a crisis. Now, speaking of bleeds, and you have severe hemophilia A, correct?
Correct.
But you were sharing with me that it hasn't presented you with a tremendous amount of adversity or too many obstacles in your life.
Right. I received a port, I think I was 1.5 years old, and from then on, I've been infusing 3 times a week.
And you learned to self-infuse rather young. You learned at 7, is that right?
7 years old. I went to the Kansas City camp, and I was kind of caught off guard. I didn't really know. It was my first time at camp. I thought they were just going to infuse me in my port, and they're like, no, you're going to have to learn how to self-infuse. I'm like, self-infuse? What's that? And I did it. I tried it. And it was successsul.
Did you have anxiety about it beforehand, or had it been something that, I mean, you're 7, so I don't know, like you're
Right.
walking around like, I don't know, I'm just dealing with some anxiety today about self-infusing. But was it something that you were cognizant of but just hadn't engaged with yet, or it wasn't really presented to you until that moment?
It was kind of, I was shocked, so I didn't really have time to be anxious about it. I was watching other kids do it, so I wanted to do it as well.
And you are now involved in camps as well, right?
Mm-hmm. We have a St. Louis camp now. I think it was our 8th year this year.
What do you see? What are some of the things as a counselor, other than being, you're an active community member, you're a good person, but what are the things that kind of draw you back to camp?
Going back and being able to be a role model for the younger kids and to teach them how I self-infuse, and I was their age when I first learned. It's really empowering. I was self-infusing at camp, and I missed a couple times, and I wasn't able to get it in my vein. And there was a kid there, he was watching me, and that made him feel like he could miss.
One of the things that I like about these kind of conversations and a willingness to admit is it opens it up for people to feel okay to be facing some of the same things. Mm-hmm. You have a bit of family history with hemophilia. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
When I was born, I was tested for hemophilia right away because my grandfather had hemophilia. When the bad blood came out, he unfortunately got AIDS and passed away in '86, I believe.
have you heard stories about him, or are there ways in which you feel as though you have gotten to know him over the years?
Yeah, he would wait, several days with a bleed because he owned a salvage yard, so he was always working and would work through the pain. And I can't even, imagine doing that now when I could just,
Right.
infuse myself in 5 minutes and basically be cured of my bleed. He had a bear. That's a
Let's
fun
go
story
back.
to tell.
Sorry, he had a bear?
He had a bear.
How do you have a bear?
Like a black bear, right? Black bear.
No, that doesn't help.
Yeah,
Like,
big, right?
how do you have a bear? I don't know how else to ask the question. Is there a bear house in the backyard?
From what I heard, they were at an animal auction.
What's an animal auction?
It's in Missouri. You don't know an animal auction?
Okay. There's a lot of Missouri here. I'm not going to touch that one, but I would still love to know how you have a bear.
So they were at an animal auction, and I think they were just going to observe. The bear was up for auction, and my grandma was sitting right next to my grandpa, or maybe he was in the back or something, and he kept bidding on it secretively, to the side. And my grandma's like, "Who keeps bidding on that bear?" He's like, "I don't know." So eventually he won the bear, and my grandma was really angry and wanted to return the bear, but his mind was set. He wanted to take the bear home. So the bear, it was a baby bear, so they got it really young. And from what I hear, it lived outside. They would go on walks with it. Yeah. I think his name was Teddy.
That's amazing. Let's make a quick pivot, I guess, because I don't know where else to go from there. It sounds like quite a character as well.
Yep.
But you've kind of grown up, it sounds like, in the community. So I'll ask the question, though I can anticipate the answer. Have you felt as though, not necessarily being connected to other family members with hemophilia, that you've been at all isolated, or has the community kind of helped with that?
No, the community has been a big help. My whole family, basically, have been a support system for me and helped me with living with hemophilia.
So while hemophilia may not have presented you with the same kinds of challenges it has for others, at a very early age, you did have quite an experience that presented you with kind of a unique story, if you'd be willing to share.
Sure. I was 5 years old. My aunt and uncle decided to take me and their son, my cousin, Zach, to Six Flags, which is an amusement park. And we were on our way home, and we were in a minivan. We were playing on the ground of the minivan without our seatbelts on. My uncle was driving. He told both of us to put on our seatbelts or hold on to something real quick. And I remember sitting in my seat and holding on to this cooler. The next thing I remember is kind of waking up, and I saw my aunt and uncle come out of the car. I was looking for Zach. I looked under a pillow. I was looking around, in the van. I remember someone coming and kind of picking me up and taking me over, and they were asking me some questions, and I remember there was a fireman there, and I told him that I had hemophilia. Later, I found out that my cousin, Zach, ended up flying out of the window, and he was killed instantly. But I found that out later. I was still worried about him at the time. I kept asking them questions. The moral of the story is that I was an advocate for myself. I spoke up to the firefighter.
Well, it's good for you at such a young age being able to say all that, and good for your mom for preparing you for. I used to, tease my grandmother a little bit because one day, one of her things was if you're ever mugged, and I was. If you're ever mugged at gunpoint, actually, was her specific thing, and I was. And the moment it was happening, literally my brain went, oh, I know what to do here. I wasn't 5, but it's helpful when parents instill these things from a very young age. In terms of your cousin, how has that event and losing him in that way played a role in your life? If it has, I don't want to overstate
Right.
it.
I mean, it's automatic. Every time I get in a car, I put on my seatbelt. I gave a speech in speech class freshman year of college, so I tried to persuade college kids to wear their seatbelt.
Well, thank you for sharing the story, and it's similar in a way to your experience, which you could have handled differently with the coach. Instead, you took the opportunity to make something productive out of it, and have a productive meeting, to take the pain and the unfortunate experiences that we encounter that are out of our control and are complete chaos and are painful, but to find ways to create utility out of them. Okay, I will never let this happen to me. When the opportunity presents itself, I will tell this story to people to encourage them to make the right safety choices as well. That's the best that we can do sometimes with some of the really painful experiences we've had. All right, welcome.
Hi, thank you.
Thanks for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
So, Allie, you do not have a bleeding disorder,
I don't have a bleeding disorder.
but we're happy to have you anyway. No, thank you for being here.
Thank you.
So, Allie, give us a little bit of an overview. You gave me such a great overview, and I have a feeling you're quite used to doing it. So go ahead and give us a little overview of who you are, what your story is, and what brings you here today.
Okay, my name is Allie Stroker, and I was born in New Jersey. And when I was 2 years old, I was involved in a car accident with my mom and my brother, and both my brother and I were injured. My brother had a traumatic brain injury, and I had a spinal cord injury, which left me paralyzed from the chest down. After my brother and I spent 6 months in a rehabilitation center, we came back and started this new life. And when I was 7 years old, I was introduced to musical theater. And that's really when I remember my life beginning, because it felt like I was given the opportunity to have a new identity. I really struggled with the identity of being a little girl in a wheelchair, and that kind of attention and people feeling sorry for me and my family. And when I started to perform, all of a sudden, I felt like I had purpose. And I loved the feeling of being on stage in front of people. It was so thrilling. And I started performing and began performing professionally at age 11. And I was given this gift of the ability to sing. I was expecting people in the arts to be really open-minded. And what I found was there was a lot of fear. After I graduated, a little show called Glee came out. There was a character on the show who was in a wheelchair. And my whole life, I had been looking for people who looked like me on stage or on television or in the movies, and there were very few. I remember seeing sometimes people in wheelchairs on Sesame Street, occasionally on a commercial, but I really didn't feel represented. And I ended up being cast on the Glee Project, which was a reality TV show, and was the runner-up, ended up being on Glee, which was incredible and such a dream come true. And this past year, I was a part of the revival of Spring Awakening, which is a rock musical that came back to Broadway with a company called Deaf West. And the company works with hearing and deaf actors. I became the first person in a wheelchair ever to appear on Broadway. And I was interviewed and had this opportunity to have a lot of press, and people kept asking me, what does this mean for your community? I had always felt like an advocate for myself, but I hadn't yet stepped into that role of being an advocate for my community.
How has this sense of community now impacted the way you think about the world, the way you represent yourself, things you pursue or not?
It has widened my perspective and scope of what the experience of having a disability is. I think that because I'm meeting more people and connecting with more people with different kinds of disabilities, I'm understanding the full scope of it, and that every person on the planet has challenges, but when you are given a disability, when you're given a diagnosis, there is an extra sense of strength that sort of kicks in. You like shift into gear, and you learn how to cope, and you meet people that are really, really challenged by it, and it has really helped me, I think, accept and have more acceptance of my full experience and not just the good stuff.
Now, being professionally involved in the arts and entertainment community, what are some of the challenges or battles that you still face, even in spite of, or maybe, I don't know, because of, but I can't imagine, so your plate, now people know who you are in the arts and entertainment community, but I imagine that hasn't necessarily alleviated all of the problems.
I feel so strongly that the disabled community is ready to represent themselves, that an authentic representation is so important now, in 2016. It needs to happen now.
Why now?
Because there's so much curiosity about disability. So why are we not fully representing it, authentically representing it? And I can't help but look at our culture and wonder, what is it that we're afraid to look at? So often, disability is presented, not represented. You open up pamphlets and you see able-bodied people sitting in hospital wheelchairs as the representation of disability. And my question is, what are we not wanting to look at? What are we afraid of? What is the fear? How do we move through it? It is such an opportunity, not just for an audience, but for an entire group of people who are working on a project to work with someone with a disability. That's my opinion.
People with disabilities, that's the only minority population that anyone at any time could wind up in. And I wonder if there is some innate awareness of that. Like if some part of me sees wheelchair and realizes, forget the bleeding disorder stuff, and just realizes like, oh yeah, that could happen to me too. You know what I mean? I wonder if there's the fear that I might be leaning into something that could become my reality.
Yes, and because of the history of disability, I really do believe that there is a perspective of better and worse. You have it worse off because you have a disability, because you have this diagnosis. You have more challenges because you have this. And it's a strange way to measure it, because every single human being, again, on this planet has challenges. And to say that having a physical disability is harder than having a intellectual disability, who's to say better or worse, more challenging or not? That's unfair.
Yeah.
What I'm interested in is why are we not able to connect with it? What about it do we put up? Why do we put up a wall, and why do people still come up to me and say, I'm so sorry?
Can I ask a somewhat obnoxious question?
Sure.
I'm going to put you on the spot.
Sure.
It's the second time I've done this to somebody during NHF. You're a singer. Would you mind just giving us a little sample?
Now that is putting someone on the spot, and yes, I will. Yes. There is a place we'll go where there is mostly quiet, flowers and butterflies. A rainbow lives beside it, and from a velvet sky, a summer storm, I can feel the coolness in the air, but I'm still warm. And then a mighty roar will start the sky to crying, but not even lightning will be frightening my lion. And with no fear inside, no need to run, No need to hide. You're standing strong and tall. You're the bravest of them all. If on courage you must call, then just keep on trying and trying and trying. You're a lion in your own way. Be a lion. Woo!
Thank you, Austin, Greta, and Allie for being here and doing this morning, nice and early, and singing for us nice and early in the morning. To watch video from any of our previous Powering Through sessions, visit poweringthrough.org, or to learn more about National Cornerstone Healthcare Services, NCHS, visit nchswecare.com.